It's about that time, isn't it? All right, well, I'll go ahead and get started. I'm sure we'll have more people join in as time goes on. But welcome everybody to our social event tonight, Cocktails and Corals. We have kind of a theme. The last one that we did in June was Minkies and Malbec, and it's probably because I had something to do with naming. I did the first one, Krista did the second one. So it's pretty obvious that we've been friends for a long time, kind of the same like brainwaves happening. But I'm very excited for tonight's presentation. It's special on a lot of different levels, so definitely going to be a pretty special evening. As with all of our socials, I'd just like to do a little introduction before we get started on what's going on at the shop. There is a lot. Sometimes I get overwhelmed with how much we have going on, but we have a lot happening. First, of course, tonight, but we also have our summer sale event on Saturday. So if you're looking for some great deals on equipment and on training specials, we have a neat event that, due to this strange world that we're living in, we're adjusting it a little bit. Normally in the summer we have this big party, but we can't really do that this year. So we've adjusted a little bit, but there's some great savings, and we're making it as fun of an event as we can without being able to like have a full-blown party. So please come by both Saturday and Sunday, 10 to 6 on Saturday, and then 12 to 5 on Sunday. Then we also have, let's see here, we have actually some great travel opportunities given the situation that we have. We just had a group come back from Key Largo last weekend. They had a blast, even though the weather wasn't the greatest, and there was a mean boat ladder, from what I hear, that tried to take a couple people out, but everyone persevered. They had a great time. The diving was awesome. So we have a few more of those on the schedule for the balance of this year. One in August, at the end of August, and one also at the end of September, and then another one in November. So just because we can't go to a lot of these more exotic destinations right now doesn't mean that we don't have other options. So I'll definitely look into that. But without further ado, I'd like to get started with our presentation. But first, this is really a pretty cool. Actually, I'm gonna get a little bit verklempt because this is one of my best friends who's presenting tonight. And as Caitlin and Krista and I were talking before we started, Krista was one of my students back in 2004. So in scuba years, that was 16 years ago. And so that was a monumental event for both of us because it really was the beginning of our friendship. And we have traveled since that time. We have traveled all over the world together I'm probably going to forget some, but to the Middle East, to the Philippines, to Indonesia, to Costa Rica, Galapagos, Maldives. God, I don't even know, everywhere. I mean, we so many trips. It's absolutely crazy. Socorro, all different places. And it's really remarkable to me that we've had this experience together. So if everyone sees down in your bottom of your screen, there's a little happy face with a plus on it, says reactions. If you click on that, I just have a quick question before we get started. Krista's had an amazing journey that started with her scuba certification, has taken her to where she is now. And I just have a quick question for everyone here. How has your diving or your snorkeling experience, has it radically changed your life in one way or the other? And I will start. For me, yeah, it's my career, So you see that little thumbs up if that has happened for you. I think this is kind of cool that we have this connection, but I know for myself, for Krista, and a lot of my very close friends who are on this chat right now, our love of the ocean has directly impacted our course of life. And for Krista, she made a full 180 change, which I think is remarkable. So with that, I give you the mother of corals, my very, very dear friend, Krista Hsu.
Never met that woman before in my life.
Yeah, no, sorry, I just made all of that up.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining and for being here. I'm really excited to be presenting about this. on this topic. Let me just share my screen and kind of get ready here. And I'm going to, whoops, that didn't work. I'm going to give a little bit of background about myself before I get into the presentation. So like Amy mentioned, I started diving in 2004, and I lived in Denver for 19 years. And while I was there, I was in the corporate world for almost all of that. And I would spend all of my vacation time and a lot of my money going on dive trips. And more often than not, it was with Ocean First. In 2017, I always knew, kind of from my travels, I traveled a lot internationally for work as well. And I always knew that someday I'd want to be an expat. I didn't necessarily know where, I didn't necessarily know how it would happen. But in 2017, I kind of got that itch, and I knew it was time for me to start looking into that. And I was working from home full time for about 3 years leading up to that. So I really thought that I'd be able to take my job with me. Spoiler alert, I did not. But I started planning my move. I literally made a list of things I wanted in a country, which narrowed it down to Panama. And I Googled places to dive in Panama and heard of and found Bocas del Toro online. So let's get into the cocktails piece of this first. Raise your drink if you have ever been to Bocas del Toro, Panama. And now do so if you have ever heard of it, because I actually had never even heard of it when I was planning to move here. And so everybody else can raise your drink too and take a drink.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So I did plan my move to Panama, and about 2 weeks before moving here, I found out that I was not going to be able to take my job. And for me, I mean, it was a huge blow, but I just knew that I was being called here. I knew that it was something I was supposed to do. And I figured, you know, the worst thing that can happen is I come down for a year, I don't like it, and I go back, you know. I don't really feel like there are mistakes in life. I think it's all learning opportunities. So right before I left, maybe it was less than a week before I moved, I went to like a goodbye dinner with Graham and Amy and a few others. And we were talking, and Graham said, you know, there's a guy that approached me that's starting a project down there, a coral restoration project down there. Do you want me to introduce you to? And I'm thinking, yeah, you know, why not? I have nothing to do. I have no job. And I'm passionate about the ocean. I don't know anything about coral restoration, but I'd love to. So Graham introduced me to Doug Marcy. He was just starting up what's now called Caribbean Coral Restoration. It's an excellent organization down here. Highly recommend you check out the website, loveforthesea.org. And Doug and I have been, mostly Doug, but we've been working together now for almost 3 years, and we've been building that project from the ground up. And huge learning experience, so much growth through that process. I owe that man so much. And we also love working together. So it's been really great. And then about 6 months ago, we had a gentleman approach us from a country in Africa asking if we might be interested in collaborating with them to rebuild a reef there. And I was immediately interested. You know, we started talking through the plans, and over the course of time, I was still working with the man, but over the course of the next few months, it kind of became clear to both of us that since Doug's mission really is about protecting the reefs in Bocas, it didn't make a lot of sense for him to make that leap out into another country. And so as we talked about it further, you know, I said, how about if we still collaborate? I still want to work together. I still want your advice on things because you know so much. What if I branch out and do my own thing, but I take the knowledge that we've gained here out to the rest of the world? And so that's what we kind of agreed to just back in April. And it's the last couple months have been a whirlwind of putting together this nonprofit and getting things started. So I'll talk a little bit more about the organization at the end, but now I'm going to kind of go through the process of what we do. First, we're going to talk a little about corals. I know that this group, a lot of this group, you probably know a lot about corals. So that's okay. I think there's a lot of people on the call that maybe necessarily don't, and maybe learn something new as well. So what is a coral? Corals are actually animals. That's something that, even though I had been a diver for almost 15 years when I moved here, I don't think I fully understood that. You know, they're pretty and they look like plants. And I think that that's kind of where my brain was. So corals are actually animals. They're tiny animals that are called, they're made up of many polyps. So polyps are single-celled organisms that live in colonies, and they actually secrete their own exoskeleton with a substance called calcium carbonate. And there's algae that lives inside the polyp that photosynthesizes to feed the coral. And they're also the source of that coral's color. So obviously, because of that, healthy corals depend on algae. And when there's stressors in the environment, and we'll go through that in just a second, the algae leaves the corals. And that's what you've heard of coral bleaching. When the algae leaves, they take they are what give coral their colors. And when they leave, then that's why coral turns white. And without something to feed them, they end up dying, and their exoskeleton obviously dies as well. So what are some of the causes of coral bleaching? There are actually many, but we'll just talk about kind of the top 4 you hear about. Ocean acidification is a fancy way of saying that the pH levels are low. And you have to memorize this graph because there'll be a quiz at the end. But really it's about the carbon dioxide levels being off, the pH being thrown off, and then the creatures and the plants and animals in the ocean are affected by that. Pollution and land runoff are 2 other causes of problems in the ocean. Keep the land runoff kind of in the back of your mind. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then rising ocean temperatures. So on the left is sea surface temperature map. On the right is actually a combo of air and sea temperatures, and it only goes up to 2010. So you can see that the trajectory we're on, if you fast forward that 10 years, we're still on that trajectory. And so we're in the point now where it's all about human intervention to try to figure out ways to save corals. So why do we care? Why does this matter? More than 25% of all marine animals inhabit reef ecosystems, and more than 1 billion people depend in some way, shape, or form on coral reefs for their livelihoods. Also, more than half of the world's oxygen is produced by the ocean, and coral reefs contribute to that number significantly. So we're getting into the steps that we've taken. And by the way, all of the pictures and videos from this presentation are from my work with Doug in Caribbean Coral Restoration. Since Mother of Corals is so new, all of the work that I've done has been with him. So I want to make sure I give credit where credit's due. So the first thing that we had to do was collect and fragment corals. So what we do is we went out into the archipelago. By the way, Bocas is an archipelago of 9 islands in the Caribbean side of Panama. And there are very few, relatively speaking, there are very few places left that have these type of corals that we work with in our project. Scientific name, we work with Acropora, both cervicornis and palmata. The street name, I don't know, the street name is staghorn on the left and then elkhorn on the right. For the rest of the presentation, I'll use those names. But there are very few populations of staghorn and elkhorn left inside the archipelago. So first of all, it was key to go find those places, right? And then you know that you're collecting corals that have survived these harsh conditions. So you're already kind of one step in the right direction. We only collect corals that have naturally separated from their colonies. We don't do any kind of cutting. And then we take those pieces, we do trim those down into smaller pieces, and we put them on, we call them trees, but they're made out of PVC, and they hang in the current. And specifically, these types of corals grow much faster hanging in the current and not on the ocean floor where there are predators. It's been calculated that they grow up to 4 times faster. And so what we do then is grow these to a certain level. And in a lot of cases, we end up repopulating new trees. We're just trying to get the populations going. We started with 9, I don't know how to get out of this, guys. There we go. 9 mother trees. And to this date, we are now at 38. coral trees in 5 or 6 different nurseries around the archipelago. And then we recently discovered that the elkhorn weren't doing as well as we thought they would hanging on trees, just like the staghorn were. So this platform is a new method that Doug actually came up with, and we're finding that they really like this model. So that's what we're going to be going with going forward. Look how pretty these babies are.
They're so beautiful. Have you named
Aren't they?
them all?
Of course.
Okay.
Come on. What do you think those tags are? There's Julie. Ingrid. No. I do name the fish, though. I have to admit. When we have in our nursery, we've got, you know, if we have like repeat offenders, I do repeat offenders.
Hey, Krista, just one quick question.
Uh-huh.
On that first video, you had that scrawled filefish hanging out.
Uh-huh.
Do you have to worry about predation on these little babies that are, they seem kind of vulnerable because they're just kind of out there? Do you worry about
we don't with the fish. The fish actually clean them, and oh my gosh, the sea urchins clean them as well.
Oh,
but what we do have, there's bivalve, there are some bivalve mussels that attach to the corals in one of our nurseries, and they're kind of like parasitic. They grow in there, and then they start feeding off of the same food that the substrate and the polyps are using. So we have to keep up with that by trimming them. And that is a favorite time of day for the fish because they get to eat the meat inside. So I'm like literally feeding the fish at work. So I somehow got out of sync here. Okay, so another method that we have dipped our toes into is called microfragmentation. And this is a relatively new process that was discovered by Dr. David Vaughn out of Mote Marine Labs in Florida a few years ago. And incidentally, Dr. David Vaughn, he's one of the most famous people kind of in this industry. He was also the mentor for Doug while setting up this project and still is to this day. So we're very proud of that. So microfragmentation was something that he discovered on accident. He dropped a stony coral on the ground. It broke into a bunch of pieces. End of the day, didn't have time to do anything with it, and just kind of put it into one of the land tanks, forgot about it for a while. And when he came back, he realized these pieces had started growing towards one another. And so what happens is if you cut up a piece of coral that normally, you know, if it's like a rock and it's growing one-dimensionally, it can now grow in exponentially more directions based on how you set them up here. So they recognize their own DNA and start growing towards their family.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so that's why, you know, we talked about the branching corals, elkhorn and staghorn can grow up to 4 times faster. This is 40 times faster. Now, naturally, in the wild, this is a slow growing coral. So basically one of our large structures, what we've kind of likened it to is that you could end up covering one of those in about 3 years. That naturally would take 200 years. It's pretty amazing stuff. Okay, step 2 was to build in place artificial structures. So something that we've got in our area that's a little bit unique to us. You know, if you look at some of the, especially the original coral restoration projects, they are replanting coral back into the existing reef. So specific species have died, but the reef still exists. And where we are, the entire reef system had collapsed. So when you snorkel out, you know, it's completely flat. There's no fish. There's no place for fish to hide and breed when those coral structures are gone. So we started making cement structures. Our first ones were put in roughly like I think it was February or March of 2018. And over the course of the rest of the year, we put a total of 50 structures in the water. And as you can see, we make different shapes and sizes and you know, try to make it interesting for the fish. But you know, we had a comment one time on Facebook, like, why don't you guys make them look more natural? And my first answer is the fish don't care. And secondly, since the goal is to be planting coral on top of these and the coral polyps actually grow over the cement, eventually you won't see that at all anyway. So.
They kind of look like shipwrecks, you know? And
yeah, that's true.
I mean, they really do. And it's, you know, you see when you're diving how a shipwreck, especially when it's in the middle of an oasis, it becomes an immediate, or I mean, in a desert, it becomes an immediate oasis for so much life. It just, there's finally a place to latch onto and hide, and as you were saying, and find some protection. So
that's a really good point. Like when you first would sink a ship, it kind of looks like an eyesore, but it doesn't take that long for the ocean to take it over and make it look more natural. So I had mentioned we started off doing the first structures in the water in 2018. So in 2019, we started doing fish count videos. Unfortunately, in Bocas, May through December, our visibility is very tricky. So that's why you only see 4 months worth of data. But you can see from January, starting off with roughly 70, and this is a 15-minute video, by the way, 70 fish swimming by the camera stand. And then in April, just over 400. I mean, that was how quickly this came back. I mean, we could see it every day. We could see the changes every day. That's kind of how we started naming fish. It's like, oh, I've seen that ocean triggerfish a number of times. His name's Trey the triggerfish, you know? And so, you know, when you come back in and people come up, well, who'd you see today? Well, I saw Bonnie and Clyde, you know? So it's kind of funny. This is how we have fun in the ocean. Okay, so then planting the corals onto the structure is step 3. These 2 pieces of elkhorn in the left, these are actually pieces that were planted back onto a reef. I will talk about this project in a bit, but you can see that week 1, we put the corals on these round cement structures that we call pucks. They're kind of look and shaped like a hockey puck. And once the coral is they first attach, then they're ready to be outplanted. And look how much growth it has had in 4 weeks. It's about to attach to the reef here. And once the polyps attach to the reef, that's when you know it's going to grow up to be a healthy adult elkhorn colony. This piece over here on the right is also an elkhorn coral. This is the original rock that we collected it on, and you can see that it started growing onto the cement structure. And this picture is a couple months old. This has come out much farther since then. I need to actually grab a new picture of that, but it's kind of hard to see this size with the size of this picture, but this piece of staghorn has attached to the cement in 3 different places. So definitely one of the goals of CCR here, and also my focus as Mother of Corals, is to train local people about not just about what's going on with the ocean and what needs to change, but involving them in these projects. So I don't want to, you know, show up in another country with a full team of people to come and take over, build a reef, and then leave, right? I want to employ local community members and give them that sense of giving back and caring and spreading the word about how they're bringing their own reefs back. And then at the end of projects, you know, we started doing tours pretty early on. It wasn't even like there was much coral to show, but people are super interested in these structures and in what we're doing. And now, these days, with how many fish are on that site, you know, anyone who comes out, I think we have tree cleaning volunteer days and stuff like that. Anyone who comes out to our site says, wow, this is the best snorkeling in Bocas. So opening the site to tourists is a way to bring that money back into the community and keep the project funded after Mother of Corals leaves. Okay, so past and current projects. Again, want to reiterate, these are all Caribbean coral restoration projects. This project the island is called San Cristobal, but there's a village there called Valle Escondido, and it is an indigenous fishing village. And we set this project up in collaboration with a nonprofit here called Floating Doctors, because Floating Doctors knew that the bay in front of their village had been overfished, and they had a depleted protein source in their diets, and they were definitely suffering from that. So we went in and we actually taught the children about the ocean and the problems and how to help. We taught them how to build structures. We did this, we did it 3 different days over the course of 2 months. And then you can see in this upper right picture, this is the boat we used to put our structures in the water, and the kids are climbing on all of it. They loved that day. And they watched us build this reef out there for them. And now over the course of the last year, right in front of the bay, in front of their village, they've seen that fish population coming back. It's really impactful. I think it might be a little bit of a misnomer to call Solarte in the past. This is our headquarters. This is where we've started our proof of concept. We're always working on this site, but you know, we are calling the proof of concept proven, and we have 3 reefs built there. And the methodology between having 3 reefs about 100 yards apart is creating migration stations for fish. So as a diver, if you've heard of the Golden Triangle between Galapagos, Malpelo, and Cocos, where sharks and other pelagics are in migration between those 3 kind of all year round, this is the same kind of concept for fish as well. So that's the same model I want to take forward into the Mother of Corals projects, because we've seen how much it works there. And then our current project is the one I mentioned a little bit ago, where we're actually, we were hired by a hotel owner to rebuild the house reef in front of the hotel. That reef had 5, 6, 7 years ago been stunningly beautiful, and in the last few years really started to degrade. And so what we're doing there is repopulating the existing reef and then building 2 artificial reefs off of there to create that triangle, but also bring the existing reef back too. And that, it's been a really great project. It's going really, really well. It's been really beneficial for us as a team to be working in such a different environment. There's a lot of wave action there. It's next to a surf site. And the corals absolutely love that. And so we're actually seeing growth. We see great growth in Solarte. We're seeing amazing growth in Cologne. So that project's only halfway done. We're 3 months into a 6-month project, and all the results so far have just been stellar.
Well,
really proud of that project. Yeah. And then future projects. So I had mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, there was a gentleman that approached us. He is from the country of Mauritius, and we are still working on getting the government funding. We're in the application process right now. His organization is called Ihula. His name's Dev Nagawa, and he also has a guy on board with him called Sharveen Prasad, who is an oceanographer. When he heard about the project, really wanted to get involved. So really fortunate to have both of them kind of on the ground helping push this forward. And I'm sure you're looking at these pictures and you're like, she has a really tough life. And you're right. But you know what, you guys, like, I want to make it happen. I want to save the planet. So I will go to places like this because I'm a giver.
Yes. And she needs help. So
yes, I do, in a lot of ways. So how can you help? So right now, you know, like I said, we're in the beginning phases. We put together a list of our ideal clients where we think that this type of methodology could really help. So if you can think of any place that you've been or anyone you know, hotel owners with house reefs, coastal governments looking to increase tourism, job opportunities, and fishery production, and then also private industry as well. Please send a note my way. I'd love to run down any leads and get the word out there. Obviously, as a nonprofit, you know that it's going to come up that I'm going to ask you to donate. But tonight is the soft launch of the business. Tomorrow is the official go live of Mother of Corals. So you guys are the first to hear about this. You're in on the ground level, and we're looking for people who want to join our movement. And if anything about this is, you know, strikes you as something that should go forth in the world, I would really love your support. Obviously, liking and following on social media is important as well. But I want to give a special thanks before we kind of get into questions. Back in April, when this was just an idea, Doug and I kind of said, maybe I should do this. And I went to a friend of mine and said, am I crazy? Like, I'm kind of thinking about going for it. And so Sasha Belter and Chad Cole, who both used to work at Ocean First, were the 2 people who said, this sounds like an amazing idea and we want to help you get there. So we met weekly for about 2 months, submitting all the paperwork to the IRS, getting everything, you know, incorporating as a business, doing everything you need to do to become a nonprofit. I would love to bore anybody with those details if they ever want to hear about it. But I really wouldn't be here without those 2. And then my other 2 board of directors are Amy Christopher, obviously, and my dear friend Jessica Howard is our treasurer. And I really, really thank this group. I also had a woman who stepped up and has helped me with marketing. and her name's Lily. She's been amazing. And then obviously, once again, I got to give a shout out to Doug because I wouldn't be here without him. So
Amazing. Really quick, I just want to also point out that this project has been recognized, or BOCUS has been recognized as a Hope Spot by Mission Blue, which is Sylvia Earle's kind of conservation program. That is a huge recognition. It is that level of recognition is not handed out to just anyone. It is specific, these Hope Spots are specifically reserved for the type of work that Krista and her team in BOCUS are doing. And so it was actually really interesting because right at the end of last week, that article came up. I think it was on Facebook or something. And so it helped us to really have an official kickoff to our Coral Awareness Week, which is what all this is about. So if you hadn't had an opportunity to read that, I encourage you to kind of search Ocean First website, or just look, or not the website, Facebook, or just do a search on that, because that is a really, really prestigious recognition, and something that I know Krista is really proud of, and I certainly am very proud of her as well, because that's huge. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I had a lot of support there too. There are 7 different organizations in that coalition, and we all put a lot of work into the application process and making it happen. So it was well deserved.
It looks like Caitlin just popped that into the chat if you wanted to click on that to read that. It's pretty awesome article. Yeah.
So with that, do we have any questions, comments?
I have a lot of questions. I'll be number 1 question asker.
Awesome.
Yes. So I would imagine that having some knowledge of general reef fish behavior would be really helpful when you're doing this. I don't know, just to have an overall understanding of the reef environment, to help with, I'm sorry, my cat just showed up there with the tail.
I can't believe mine's not come up here yet.
But I'm just wondering if that was like part of your training, is to kind of take a whole overall bird's eye view of the reef ecosystem that would help figure out like the best course of action.
Yeah, for sure. And like I mentioned, Doug had Dr. David Vaughn as his mentor, kind of kicking him off into the right direction. But I know Doug's done a ton of extensive research in those arenas. And I specifically learned from Doug, but we'll come across things that we've never seen before, behavior we didn't quite expect. And, thankfully there's the internet, right? But we've also had a lot of really good marine biology resources locally. I've got a friend who is part of the Hope Spot Coalition who's done some projects with us. She works for the School for Field Studies, and there's been times that they've done projects out at our place, and we've talked through problems, and they've presented us on things that we could change in the way that we've set things up. So yeah, it's super important. Absolutely.
Awesome.
I have a question.
Yes.
How is the new growth that you're putting out there able to cope with the warmer waters, the rising temperature?
Yeah. So there's a couple things about that. Number one, well, I had mentioned that we're going out and finding what few places that the corals are left. So those are already kind of the hardy corals that have developed some traits that can withstand some of that. Another thing is we take those different collection point trees and we put them together so that when coral spawning happens, the sperm and eggs from those different collection points have the opportunity to breed together and potentially make something that we kind of call super corals. And then a third point to that is, honestly, the first year that we had outplanted some corals onto like a more shallow reef, we had a couple weeks of really warm water, and it seems like it's actually a pattern in BOCUS the first 2 weeks of June. The water temperatures just shoot up and it's constantly low tide. And we didn't see that coming, and we lost all the corals on that shallow reef. So what we did to prepare for this year was, you go back out into the wild and you notice, okay, a lot of these are growing out from under things, and they're also causing their own shade. So we started planting them lower down and in shaded parts of the structures. And, we kind of braced ourselves for the first few weeks of June, like what's going to happen this year. And, honestly, they started to lose a little bit of color, and you were sitting there going like, please no, please no. But they made it. They actually survived, and the color came back once the water's regulated. So that for us was like, okay, we have the prescription specifically for staghorn. And so that new project that we're doing out in Cologne that I talked about, we are doing structures where all the staghorn are in the base coming out and the elkhorn are up on top, because they don't have an issue with the temperature. They like the heavy waves and they like to be closer to the surface. So it really did structure, the way that we built out this new project was super helpful for us.
Krista?
Yes.
Speaking of that project in Cologne, my thought was when you mentioned that, you said that 7 or 8 years ago it was really beautiful, and then it died off rapidly, and now you're rebuilding it. Well, did you identify the cause of the die-off? Because what will happen to your new coral growth there if you haven't identified and rectified the cause of the die-off?
Right. Well, the die-off is kind of the same. There are the larger issues that are global, and then there are some not small, but different issues that are local to Bocas.
Localized? Okay.
Yeah, that are the same of the ones that we're, finding and collecting. And so, growing those super corals that I talked about is part of fixing that problem. And then also building these artificial reefs off of that, so that we can, the corals that grow on the artificial reefs, come spawning season, will repopulate up and down that reef, right? And they'll go into the places where they have a better chance to survive. But the fact that we're using the corals that have survived the conditions thus far is really what is giving us that advantage.
Okay.
Krista, I was wondering, I've been reading about manipulation during the fragmentation stage using chemicals and warmer water temperature to be able to accustom the end result corals so that they are more functional, I guess, during acid rain, during higher temperatures. Are you guys using any of those methods at all?
You know what? We don't have a scientific base. Like, we don't have a scientist on staff. And our land tanks have been a little bit iffy. I've read about that as well. And it's super interesting. And it's a great idea, right? Obviously, to try to acclimate corals to what they might see in the future, because as far as we can tell, this changing climate isn't going to just stop, right?
No.
But we have not done that in our project currently, no.
Thanks.
I've got a few folks that have their hands raised. Deborah Burke, would you like to ask your question?
Maybe muted?
Deborah, is she there? We also have a question from Kim Hempstead.
Hi, Kim.
Hi, Krista. I'm curious if you're coordinating with other coral restoration organizations around the planet and like comparing results and seeing how others are progressing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Good question. We do quite a bit. And what's super helpful for us, and I think other organizations as well, is following each other on Instagram, because we see the new things that everybody's putting out. So I have some examples of both good and not bad, but just we've talked a lot with an organization in Thailand. They're called New Heaven Reef Conservation. And we share a lot of ideas back and forth with them. They gave us this idea of creating these round cement structures that have wine bottles in them, and that corals really like growing on glass. The polyps grow on glass faster because they don't have to, the cement needs 28 days to cure in the ocean before we can plant corals on them. So anyway, my point is, it works great for them. And for us, the corals were trying to get thicker and were trapped in the neck of the bottle and ended up breaking off. And so what we started doing is actually attaching them to the outside of the bottles, and it's actually starting to work well for us. But it's interesting because it works, putting them inside the neck of the bottle works perfect for them. And for some reason for us here, it doesn't. There's been a lot of collaboration like that back and forth, but some really great news here locally is that there are two new coral restoration projects in Panama, and our group and those two groups have recently met up, and we've got a WhatsApp group. We're constantly sharing information back and forth with one another and talking about trying to do like a live collaboration when travel bans are lifted. So really good thing. I mean, coral restoration is not a competitive industry, right? It's so different for me being growing up in the corporate world. We're all trying to do the same thing. You know, we're all trying to save coral reefs from dying. And so nobody's protective of what they're doing. And I went to a conference a year and a half ago. It was the first coral restoration conference ever. And that was such a great feeling, being in a room with 500 people, all having the same goal, and no one was like covering their secrets, right? Everybody's like, let's make this happen. It's pretty beautiful, actually.
Nice. I have a question on behalf of my niece Mairead, who is wondering if—
Is she on the call?
She's with Kale, I think, but I got this texted. Is the Caribbean Sea acidifying? Is that something to be worried about?
Yes, it is. And I mean, I don't know if I want to be like, you should worry about it, because I don't want her to not sleep tonight. But but yes, I mean, but this is a problem across the world, and there are definitely steps that humans can take to help that slow down, for sure. I know there's a lot that we've all heard, you know, obviously reducing your carbon footprint and reducing single-use plastics. You hear about reef safe sunblock, and I'm here to tell you people in Colorado, I have started preaching, even if you're landlocked, I think you should use reef safe sunblock, because that land runoff issue that we talked about before, any chemicals that we use in any of our products have the opportunity to end up in the ocean. So those are the things that are contributing to acidification. But that was a really great question, Mairead.
All right, another question from Don Hassler.
Yeah, hey, Krista.
Hey, Don.
I think Sasha asked this in the chat, but are you keeping the program going in Panama? When you move to Mauritius?
Oh, well, it's Doug's program. So yeah, he's still going to be here. And I'm not totally sure what that will look like going forward, if I will be going back and forth from Mauritius and still be involved, or if I'll be, you know, there for 6 months straight. I'm not really sure how that looks, but Doug is, Caribbean Coral Restoration is his baby, and he's keeping it going.
Right, another question from Lorena.
Hi, Krista.
Hi, Lorena, how are you?
Great, thank you. Congratulations on this presentation. It's amazing. I just wanted to ask if you could tell us a little bit more about your Mother of Corals project and where you're looking to take that going forward.
Yeah, so actually, you know, one thing I forgot to mention was how I even came up with that name. I mean, I guess it might be somewhat obvious, but I was performing a tour at CCR probably about a year ago, and I was in the water holding up a tree branch with corals growing, and I was talking about the genealogy. You know, we keep track of different generations of coral, mother trees, daughter trees, granddaughter trees, talking about all of the genotypes and things like that. And one of the students kind of gasped and went, "You're the mother of corals." And I'm like, I kind of like that. So when it came time to pick a name, I knew right away what it was going to be. But yeah, so, you know, since Mother of Corals is pretty new, I'm searching for projects. I'm in collaboration. We're in the application process to get government funding in a country called Mauritius, which is near the Seychelles. A lot of people have heard of Seychelles Islands. And so with any luck and travel bans being lifted, we could start that by the beginning of next year. That's what I'm hoping. But other than that, Lorena, I'm actively looking for opportunities where people, you know, it's interesting when you look at all of the coral restoration projects around the world, rightfully so, they're all local, right? We did a lot of searching trying to find if anyone else is doing something like this, where you take the knowledge on the road and you take it to places that maybe wouldn't have the people or the motivation to get something like this started. So really looking for opportunities for coastal communities who are interested but don't know how to get started. So that's where I'm going with it.
Hey, any other questions?
So I post, I'm sorry, I'm like taking on so many questions. This is much a question to Krista. It's a question to all, everyone on this chat right now. And I had put this in the chat just to throw it out there. If anybody would be interested in participating in this type of work with Krista's group as cleaners and helping to tend to the babies and helping, you know, depending on what capacity, just getting involvement with something like this. Does that sound like something that is intriguing to everyone? A little bit of give back? Do I get a thumbs up?
Yeah.
Or, you know, use your little gizmo here, reactions. Because this type of interactive kind of voluntourism, ecotourism, if you will, is something that Ocean First is very passionate about. And we want to help support grassroots operations like organizations like Krista has put together, because I think the work is really, really important. And, you know, as humans, we've certainly done our part to, you know, to take, and any opportunity that we have to give back, I think is really important. And sometimes, you know, folks aren't sure how to do that. And that's where your friendly neighborhood dive shop, Ocean First, comes in, where we can help put together opportunities like this and make it just turnkey, where you have a chance to participate, give back, and, you know, and make a difference. And as you can see, the work that Krista is doing, it does make a difference. It works. And I love the part where there's collaboration with the local community to educate them and give them a way to, you know, reap the benefit of their natural resources. That's really the key to turning this around, is to get that involvement. And I think that is so important. So if that's something that is of interest, stay tuned, because we're going to be doing more at this. We just got to get past this 2020 crap and we'll be off to the races.
Just gotta get past this year.
Yeah, we just gotta get past this year.
Amy, you guys, so I think what you're saying is you need to run a dive trip to the Mauritius.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, no, I'm all down for it. We do have, so we had a trip to Roatan at the end of August that we had to move, because that's my job right now, is moving trips. So that is now in April of next year, but that's with a different organization, but the same type of work. And then once this Mother of Corals gets established in Mauritius and in new places, absolutely, you bet. That's exactly what we're going to be doing. And I think it's incredibly exciting, and just takes a, you know, to go someplace beautiful is one thing, but to go someplace beautiful and contribute takes it to a whole different place.
Yeah.
So Krista, you haven't been there yet, but there's tons of great diving in Mauritius and an island called Rodrigue. And then the Seychelles also is amazing. So you could expand out to that whole region.
You could be my translator, Don.
I'm happy to do it. I volunteer.
All right.
You know what, you guys, I was going to say also, I know Krista adds a whole nother element, but like we have high school students who are in National Honor Society and they have to do hundreds of hours of volunteer. And that's kind of weird right now with what's going on. And our daughter was lucky enough to come to Soropta last year and worked with the Sea Turtle Conservancy, and we dove in Bocas del Toro with Kathy. Yeah, and that was an amazing trip. But our son really wants to get in the water again. He got a taste this weekend, and I know he would love to help out with. They've both worked at CCMI too, in the Central Caribbean Marine Institute with their coral restoration. And I mean, when you get high school students who need the volunteer hours anyway, and you need plants, the corals cleaned and things, those kids, absolutely. I know it's a whole different than all of us adults, but just another aspect to kind of collaborate with them.
Absolutely. Yep. I mean, the younger the better, right? We want to grow a generation of humans that understand that this is not a debate, that this is something that has to happen.
Yeah, because it's them and their children that are going to see the worst of this.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So just real quick, obviously, groups like Krista's depend on support from those who are passionate about this type of work. So it's hard to ask for contributions when you're, on the receiving end. So if you would like to help get involved with Krista's work, please don't be shy. Contribute to her cause. None of the stuff that runs on, it runs on goodwill, but it also needs some financial backing. So if you're feeling called to that, please help contribute. On her slide here, you can see the website there where you can be a little bit more about her project and how to get involved. You're always welcome to contact me also at Ocean First if you happen to be in the shop and want to, chat more about it. But this is really important work, and it's hard to get started with this stuff. We're, just kind of getting started here, and we need help, we need support. So please, don't be shy and help us to get this project up and running. It's really important stuff. All right, and if you have further questions for Krista, she does have children to look after, so I don't want to keep her too long. But please feel free to follow on Instagram and Facebook. Those links are here, and check out the website, and just let us know if you're ready to help out and get involved, and stay tuned because there will definitely be some opportunities coming up.
Amy?
Yes.
Just one other question. There have been a lot of offers of people offering to do things in the chat and a lot of good questions. Do you save those so you can go back to them, or
yes,
how does that work? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll make sure if we haven't, addressed the questions here, I will work with Krista to get those out to everyone. But once again, if there are some more pointed questions that you would like to communicate directly with her, please feel free to do so, or you can also always funnel them through me at the shop, and be happy to get those forwarded.
Okay. Yeah, Dad, you need to go to Amy if you have questions.
Yeah, go to me and I'll go to her, and then she'll go to me, and then I'll go to you. So it's right. It's efficient that way.
I forgot to do one shout out. I forgot to say thank you to Jess Peralt for building my website. So sorry about that. But I also wanted to say thank you so much for everyone who came out tonight and stayed for the entirety of the call. I really appreciate the time that I was given to talk to you all about what we're doing.
Thank you, Krista.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Krista.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
We'll see you all soon.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And hopefully we'll see you this weekend. Don't be shy. Wear a mask.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.